The winter wind cut through Seoul's Gangnam district like a blade that February evening. Each gust a reminder that cold didn't care about designer labels or empty pockets. Chloe Williams's breath formed small clouds as she hurried past the luxury boutiques, her shift at the Hagwon running late again. The looks she got, some curious, most dismissive, had become background noise after 2 years in Korea. Just another black woman teaching English. Just another foreigner who didn't quite belong. She was cutting through the back street near the Cheongdam luxury towers when she heard Minjun's mocking voice echo off the concrete walls. "Look at the foreign teacher. Still here? Thought you'd go back to where you came from by now." Chloe kept walking, clutching her worn messenger bag tighter. Minjun and his friends from the real estate office loved this game, cornering her in places where no one important would see. "I'm talking to you," Minjun sneered, stepping into her path. His 2 buddies flanked her like they'd done this before. "You know, you're not welcome here. This neighborhood is for Koreans. For people who matter." Chloe's voice came out steady despite the cold seeping through her thin jacket. "Please, Minjun. I just want to go home." "Home?" He laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "This isn't your home. It will never be your home." He snatched her bag, rifling through it with theatrical disgust. "What's this? Your rent money? How pathetic." With a casual flick, he tossed her bag into the nearby dumpster, watched her scramble to retrieve soggy bills and her cracked phone. "Good luck surviving in our country now, foreigner." The 3 men climbed into Minjun's Mercedes, tires squealing as they disappeared around the corner, leaving Chloe alone in the alley that the security cameras never quite covered. The expensive stores on the main street glittered just 50 feet away, but she might as well have been invisible. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself, trying not to cry because crying meant admitting how close she was to breaking. Her visa renewal was in 3 weeks. Her savings, what little she'd scraped together, now reeked of garbage. She was so tired of being alone in a country that saw her but never truly saw her. Then she heard it through the howling wind. A sound that didn't belong to the city night. A child sobbing. Chloe followed the sound deeper into the shadows, her body screaming to find warmth, until she found them, 2 small figures huddled behind a luxury car with tinted windows and bullet holes in the door. 2 children, identical twins, maybe 5 years old, wearing matching designer coats that were somehow useless against the cold. Both shaking violently. Both terrified. The boy looked up at Chloe with wide, dark eyes, speaking rapid Korean she barely understood. Then, in broken English, "Please, help. Sister, so cold." The little girl had gone quiet, her lips tinged blue, her small body limp against her brother's chest. Chloe didn't hesitate. Her hands moved to unzip her coat, the only real coat she owned. The navy blue puffer jacket she'd bought after saving for 3 months, the one that kept her warm through Seoul's brutal winters, the one that still smelled faintly of the fabric softener from the laundromat where she'd treated herself last week. "What you doing?" the boy whispered, his accent thick with panic. She pulled it off, feeling the February air bite into her immediately through her thin work shirt, and wrapped it around both children. The fabric still held her body heat. She tucked the girl inside first, then the boy. "No, no." The boy tried to push it back at her, tears streaming down his face. "You freeze. You die." Chloe was already lifting the unconscious girl into her arms, gesturing for the boy to follow. "I live close," she lied through chattering teeth, her breath coming out in white puffs. "Very close. Come." The boy stared at her, this foreign woman, this stranger with dark skin his world had taught him to fear or fetishize, who was now giving up her warmth to save him and his sister. He stumbled after her on frozen legs. Chloe didn't tell him that close meant a 40-minute walk to her tiny Gazawan room barely bigger than a closet. She didn't mention that she'd have to skip meals for 2 weeks to replace this coat. She didn't explain that she was breaking about 17 rules by bringing them there, risking her housing and her visa. She just walked faster, holding the little girl close, whispering prayers her grandmother had taught her back in Atlanta, feeling the cold sink into her bones with each step. Behind them, in the shadows, men in black suits emerged from the damaged car, speaking urgently into phones. The children had run during the ambush. The boss's children had disappeared. And now a foreign woman was carrying them into the Seoul night, leaving no trace except her warmth wrapped around two heirs to Korea's most dangerous criminal empire. 3 days later, Andy Park would stand in front of her building, holding that navy blue coat in his hands, his men having turned the city upside down to find the woman who'd saved his children. And when she opened her door, exhausted from covering double shifts to replace what she'd given away, she would see the most dangerous man in Seoul holding the only warmth she'd owned. "You gave my children your coat," he would say in careful English, his voice like winter itself. "In my world, no one gives without wanting something. So tell me, what do you want?" But that confrontation was still 3 days away. Tonight, Chloe just walked through the frozen streets of Seoul, two children who weren't hers pressed against her body shaking from cold and fear and the strange certainty that nothing would ever be the same. Tonight, she chose warmth for them over safety for herself. And in the darkness behind her, the most powerful man in Korea's underworld was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a bullet or a threat. It's a woman who gives everything when she has nothing left to lose. The Hagwon's fluorescent lights felt like judgment as Chloe erased the whiteboard for the third time that hour. Behind her, 12-year-old Subin whispered something in Korean that made the other kids giggle. Chloe caught the word kamdungi, the slur they thought she didn't understand. "English only, please," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Professional. Like the director had warned, don't make trouble. Foreign teachers are replaceable." The words stung less than they used to, but they still stung. 2 years in Seoul had taught Chloe to build armor from smaller cuts. She'd learned to smile through the stares on the subway, the way Ajumas clutched their purses tighter when she walked past, the English Academy parents who requested a different teacher without explanation. She loved teaching. Loved watching comprehension dawn on a student's face when they finally understood a difficult concept. But moments like these, when the children parroted the casual racism they absorbed from adults, reminded her that she was always performing. Always proving she belonged in a space that constantly questioned her right to exist in it. By the time her shift ended at 9, exhaustion had settled into her bones like old snow. The director barely looked up as she clocked out, already scrutinizing next month's enrollment numbers. Chloe grabbed her bag and stepped into February's brutal cold, pulling her navy puffer coat tighter around her body. This coat represented 3 months of careful saving. 3 months of choosing between the subway and walking, between fresh vegetables and instant ramen, between a new coat and everything else. She'd finally bought it in December, and it had become her constant companion through Seoul's unforgiving winter. February in Gangnam meant walking past stores she'd never enter, restaurants she couldn't afford, people who looked through her like glass. The luxury boutiques glowed with warm light, displaying handbags that cost more than her monthly salary. Mercedes and BMWs glided past, their occupants warm and safe behind tinted windows. She was cutting through the side street near the Cheongdam Towers, a shortcut she'd learned that shaved 10 minutes off her commute when she saw them. 2 small children, identical twins, standing beside a black Mercedes with its door hanging open. The car looked expensive even by Gangnam standards, but something was wrong. The door hung at an odd angle, and she could see cracks in the windshield even from a distance. The children wore matching designer coats, Burberry, probably, with the distinctive check pattern visible even in the dim streetlight. But they were shaking so violently their teeth chattered. Their small hands had gone red, then white. No adults in sight. The crowd flowed past like water around stones. Busy. Important. Not their problem. Seoul had taught Chloe this lesson well. Mind your business, keep moving, don't get involved. Especially if you're foreign. Especially if you're black. The rules were different for her, the margin for error smaller. But she stopped. The little girl's lips were turning blue. Her hands moved before her brain caught up, muscle memory from babysitting her cousins back in Atlanta overriding common sense. She was unzipping the navy puffer coat she'd saved 3 months to buy before she'd consciously decided to do it. The cold hit her immediately, vicious through her thin work shirt. February air bit into her skin like teeth. She knelt down in front of the children, wrapping both of them inside the coat's warmth, tucking it around their small bodies. The girl was nearly unconscious, her eyes unfocused, but the boy looked up at Chloe with shocked, terrified eyes. "You're okay now," she whispered, even though they probably didn't understand English. She rubbed their arms through the coat, trying to generate warmth, checking the girl's pulse at her tiny wrist. "Weak but steady. You're going to be okay." The boy said something in rapid Korean, his voice high with panic. Chloe caught the word Yalma, mother, and her heart cracked. Where were these children's parents? What had happened to that car? Before she could process the situation, men in black suits materialized from nowhere, stern faces, earpieces, moving with military precision that set off alarm bells in Chloe's mind. They weren't police. They were something else. They swept the children into the Mercedes without a word, without acknowledging Chloe's existence. One man, younger than the others, with a scar across his eyebrow, paused to look at her coat wrapped around the children. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then apparently thought better of it. The car vanished into Seoul's glittering night, taking her coat with it. Chloe stood there shivering in the February cold, watching her breath form clouds in the air. Her body screamed for warmth. Her mind whispered she was an idiot. That coat represented security, represented the careful planning and sacrifice that kept her afloat in this expensive city. But something in her chest felt lighter as she began the long walk home through streets that had never felt like hers. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Baby, when you see someone in need and you got something to give, you give it. That's what makes us human." She didn't know she'd just given warmth to the future heirs of Korea's most dangerous man. She didn't know he was already looking for her. She only knew that 2 children were safe, and somehow, despite everything, that felt like enough. 3 days later, Chloe was heating instant ramen in her tiny Gaziwan room when the black SUVs arrived. She saw them from her window, 3 vehicles, too expensive for this neighborhood, parked like a barricade across the narrow street. The vehicles were immaculate, black paint gleaming even in the dim evening light, and they blocked traffic with the confidence of people who didn't fear consequences. Men in dark suits emerged, scanning the building with professional efficiency. They moved like soldiers, communicating with subtle hand signals, their eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses despite the late hour. Residents stopped and stared, pulled out phones to record, whispered nervously to each other. Chloe's heart kicked against her ribs. She knew somehow that they were here for her. The knock came 60 seconds later. Sharp. Authoritative. The kind of knock that didn't expect to wait. Her hands trembled as she approached the door, mind racing through possibilities. Immigration? Had someone reported her for bringing those children to her room? Was her visa in jeopardy? The Hagwon had warned her about any behavior that could be construed as problematic. She opened the door to find him filling her doorway, tall, at least 6 feet, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. His face was beautiful in a harsh, angular way, all sharp cheekbones and intense eyes like black ice. The men behind him were weapons barely leashed, their hands resting near their jackets in a way that suggested concealed firearms. "You gave my children your coat," he said in careful, accented English. Not a question. An accusation. Chloe's throat went dry. They were cold. He stepped inside without invitation, and she was too stunned to stop him. His gaze catalogued everything, her cramped Gaziwan room barely bigger than a walk-in closet, the hot plate on the single counter, the English textbooks stacked like walls against the narrow bed, the laundry hanging from a line strung across the ceiling. She saw her space through his eyes, poverty, struggle, the careful management of someone living on the edge. When he looked at her again, his confusion was palpable, almost offensive. Like he couldn't reconcile what he was seeing with what she'd done. "What do you want?" His voice carried the weight of a man accustomed to being obeyed, someone used to people having angles and agendas. "Money? Visa sponsorship? Access to my business contacts? A job? Nothing. I wanted nothing." The words seemed to physically confuse him. He cocked his head slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle with missing pieces. "Everyone wants something." He moved closer, and Chloe caught expensive cologne mixed with something darker. Danger. Power. The scent of someone who lived in a different world entirely. "In my world, kindness is a transaction. People do favors to create debts, to gain leverage. So tell me your price before I decide it for you." Heat flashed through her fear, indignation that felt reckless but necessary. She was tired of being invisible, of being dismissed, of having her motivations questioned. "Not everyone operates like that," she said, voice steadier than she felt. "They were children. Small children, freezing in the street. I'm not asking you for anything. I don't want anything from you." Something flickered behind those cold eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or suspicion, like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. He studied her face like he was reading a contract for loopholes, searching for the deception he was certain existed. The silence stretched taut between them, electric and suffocating. Outside, she could hear his men speaking in low Korean, the sound of car doors opening and closing. "I don't believe in charity," he finally said, voice soft as a blade being drawn. "People like me, we don't receive gifts without strings. Your coat will be replaced. Your rent is paid for 6 months. Consider it payment for services rendered. I don't care what you want." He pulled a business card from his pocket, placed it on her small table with the precision of someone used to having their gestures carry weight. "You will see me again." He left, taking his men and their implicit violence with him. The SUVs pulled away moments later, leaving neighbors clustered in doorways, whispering and pointing at her window. Chloe locked the door with shaking hands, her heart racing with something she refused to name. She picked up the business card with trembling fingers. Heavy stock, embossed lettering in both Korean and English, Andy Park. Private equity. The title was obviously a front for something else. Fear, yes. She felt that. But also something dangerously close to fascination. Something that terrified her more than his implicit threats ever could. The coat appeared on her doorstep the next morning, Canada Goose, black, her exact size, still in its box with tags attached. The price tag made her gasp, 1,200,000 Korean wons. Nearly a month's salary. No note. Just expensive inevitability wrapped in tissue paper. Chloe left it in the hallway, refusing to bring it inside. It sat there all day like an accusation, like a debt she never agreed to incur. Neighbors walked past it, eyes widening at the brand name, whispering about the foreign teacher and her mysterious benefactor. 2 days later, her landlady knocked with confused excitement, her weathered face bright with curiosity. "Your rent." Someone paid 3 months advance. "Very generous boyfriend." The Ajumma's eyes sparkled with gossip potential. "He came yesterday. Very handsome. Very rich-looking." Fury burned through Chloe's exhaustion, hot and immediate. She didn't want his money. Didn't want to be bought, to be managed, to be another problem he could solve by throwing cash at it. She'd spent her whole life refusing to be indebted to people who saw charity as leverage. She grabbed the coat, marched to the address she'd found on the business card, a sleek office building in Gangnam that screamed money and menace. The lobby was all marble and glass, security guards in pristine uniforms, the kind of place where her presence immediately drew suspicious stares. Security stopped her at the lobby desk, a young man with a perfectly pressed uniform and suspicious eyes. "No appointment, no entry. Then tell Andy Park I'm returning his guilt payment." They made a call, rapid Korean spoken in hushed tones. She was escorted up to the 15th floor, through corridors lined with abstract art that probably cost more than her education, into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. Andy appeared 5 minutes later, alone this time, somehow more intimidating in the intimate space than he'd been in her cramped room. "You're angry," he observed, closing the door behind him. "You paid my rent. You bought me a coat. You don't get to do that. I was repaying a debt." "There is no debt." Her voice rose despite her intention to stay calm. "I didn't help." The photograph showed a younger Andy, his face carved from grief that looked fresh and raw. He was holding 2 infants like they were the only things keeping him human, the only things keeping him from completely surrendering to whatever darkness lived inside him. The twins from that night. Jiwoo and Jia, the article named them. Motherless for 2 years. Being raised by a man who dealt in violence and intimidation, who commanded fear and respect in equal measure. What kind of life did those children have? What Chloe didn't know, Andy was already watching. From his car parked across from the Hagwon, he observed her in ways that disturbed his own sense of propriety. He watched how the Korean mothers clutched their children closer when Chloe passed, how the convenience store clerk followed her through the aisles with suspicious eyes, how some people stared with curiosity while others looked right through her with casual contempt. She moved through Seoul like a ghost, visible but unseen, present but never quite belonging. It fascinated him, infuriated him. He couldn't stop watching, couldn't stop trying to understand this woman who'd given everything when she had nothing. "Boss." His Lieutenant Kim slid into the passenger seat, voice tight with concern. "She's not Korean. This attention, it makes us look weak. Your enemies will see this as a vulnerability they can exploit." "I know what they'll see." "Then why?" "I need to understand her." Andy's jaw clenched, watching Chloe disappear into the subway station, shoulders hunched against the cold. She gave everything when she had nothing. That doesn't exist in our world. People like us, we don't know how to process genuine altruism. Exactly. She's dangerous because she doesn't make sense. She doesn't follow the rules we understand. Andy's fingers tapped the steering wheel in an unconscious rhythm of agitation. Kim was right. But Andy couldn't look away. Couldn't stop wondering what kind of person chose to save strangers at personal cost, expecting nothing in return. Couldn't stop thinking about her. "Appa, where's the coat lady?" Andy looked up from his paperwork, contracts that needed signing, reports on the week's protection revenues, to find Jiwoo standing in his office doorway, Jia clutching her brother's hand. Their small faces were solemn, determined. They asked every day now. For a week straight, the same question. He'd tried ignoring it, dismissing it with vague promises. Tried distracting them with toys, with treats, with anything that might redirect their persistent curiosity. But their eyes held the same stubborn hope their mothers once had, that same quiet determination that refused to be denied. "Please, Appa," Jia whispered, her voice barely audible. She was the quieter twin, the one who'd retreated further into herself since her mother died. "We want to say thank you." Andy closed his laptop with more force than necessary, the sharp sound making both children flinch slightly. Guilt twisted in his chest. When had his children started fearing his moods? "She's busy," he said, gentling his voice. "She has her own life." "But we didn't thank her," Jiwoo insisted, his small face scrunched with worry. "Teacher Kim says we must always say thank you when someone is kind." "She was very kind, Appa." The simple logic of children. Unarguable. Honest in a way Andy's world never was. He could see them that night in his mind, 2 small figures wrapped in a stranger's coat, saved by someone who had no reason to care. Someone who'd given up her own warmth without hesitation. He thought about Chloe returning his money, refusing his coat, angry at his attempts to create a transaction where she'd intended only kindness. Maybe she was right. Maybe his children needed to learn that kindness could exist without obligation. "All right," he heard himself say. "We'll visit her." Chloe opened her door to find all 3 of them, the dangerous man and his small shadows, looking oddly vulnerable standing in her cramped hallway. They insisted, Andy said, jaw tight. Like the words cost him something. I apologize for the intrusion. But Chloe only saw the children. Hi. I remember you. You're the brave ones from that night. Jiwoo and Jia lit up like lanterns, shyness melting under her genuine warmth. Within minutes, she had them sitting on her floor, the tiny space barely accommodating all of them, teaching them English through a clapping game she learned from her own childhood. Butterfly. Jiwoo shouted, pronouncing it carefully. Yes. Perfect. Chloe high-fived him, and his face split into the widest smile Andy had seen in months. Andy stood in the doorway, watching this impossible scene unfold in a room smaller than his walk-in closet. He watched Chloe braid Jia's hair with gentle fingers, the kind of casual maternal affection he'd forgotten existed. Watched her high-five Jiwoo when he pronounced words correctly, celebrating his small victories like they mattered. Watched his children, his silent, careful children who'd forgotten how to be children after their mother died, bloom under this stranger's warmth. Their laughter filled the tiny room, bright, unrestrained, alive in a way he couldn't remember hearing in 2 years. Something cracked in his chest. Something he'd locked away the day he buried his wife, sealed behind concrete and steel because grief was a weakness his world would exploit. They need this, he said quietly when the children were distracted by a picture book Chloe had pulled from somewhere. His voice was rough, unpracticed at this kind of honesty. What you give them. The warmth, the attention. I can't, his voice caught. I don't know how anymore. Chloe looked at him, really looked, and saw past the expensive suit to the exhausted father underneath. Saw the loneliness in his eyes, the way his hands flexed like he wanted to reach out but had forgotten how. They're wonderful children, she said softly. You're doing better than you think. I'm failing them. The words came out before he could stop them, raw and honest. I keep them safe. I give them everything money can buy. But I can't give them what you did in 5 minutes, joy. Lightness. The feeling that the world isn't just dangerous and cold. I'll pay you, he continued, shifting back to business because that was safer, more familiar. Help with them. A few weeks. Tutoring, English practice, whatever you want to call it. Then I leave you alone. You get your life back. Chloe should have said no. Every instinct screamed at her to recognize the trap. This man was dangerous. His world was violence and fear. Getting involved meant risking everything she'd carefully built. But Jia was showing her a drawing, and Jiwoo was tugging her sleeve, asking her to teach him another word, and they needed someone. Needed warmth and attention, and the kind of uncomplicated affection children deserved. Okay, she heard herself say. But not for money. Just for them. Because they deserve better than growing up thinking kindness requires payment. Andy nodded slowly, not understanding her at all. Not yet. But somewhere in his chest, that crack widened just a little more. Andy's compound in Pyeongchang-dong was a fortress disguised as a home, traditional Hanok architecture meeting modern security, marble floors that echoed footsteps, armed men at every entrance scanning visitors with professional paranoia. Chloe felt small inside it, foreign in ways that had nothing to do with her passport. The first time she arrived, guards patted her down with efficient hands. Security cameras tracked her movement through corridors. She passed rooms she wasn't meant to see, men counting cash, others cleaning weapons with practiced ease. This was a world she'd only seen in movies, made real and immediate. But the twins didn't care about any of that. Teacher Chloe, what's this? Jia pointed at the pot bubbling on the stove in the compound's massive kitchen, eyes wide with curiosity. Gumbo. It's from where I'm from. Louisiana, in America. Chloe stirred the rich, dark roux, the smell of home filling the kitchen. My grandmother taught me to make it. Said a good gumbo can cure almost anything, sadness, sickness, bad days. Andy appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by unfamiliar smells and the sound of his children's laughter. He watched Chloe explain each ingredient, letting Jiwoo stir while Jia carefully added spices under supervision. You cook? He asked, voice carrying surprise. Everyone cooks where I'm from. It's how we show love. Chloe smiled, tasting the gumbo and adjusting seasoning. Food is family. Food is memory. When you eat my grandmother's gumbo, you're eating her stories, her history. Something flickered in his expression, recognition, perhaps, of a concept he understood, but had forgotten. Later that evening, after the twins had eaten Chloe's gumbo with enthusiastic approval, Andy made japchae, his movements precise and practiced in the kitchen. The noodles glistened perfectly, vegetables cut with knife skills that spoke of years of practice. Chloe watched him move through the kitchen with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. My wife taught me, he said quietly, plating the dish with care. Said a man should know how to feed his children. That it was a father's duty to nourish them, not just provide for them. She made me practice until I could do it perfectly. The admission hung in the air between them, intimate and unexpected. Chloe saw the grief in the set of his shoulders, the way his hands moved through motions that must remind him of someone lost. The language barriers became their own strange intimacy. Chloe's broken Korean made the children giggle. She confused similar-sounding words, creating nonsensical sentences that had everyone laughing. Andy's careful English improved daily, though he still paused to find the right words, creating thoughtful silences that felt comfortable rather than awkward. She taught him y'all, making him practice the pronunciation until Jiwoo and Jia dissolved into giggles at their father's attempts. He taught her the difference between banmal and jondoetmal, informal and formal speech, explaining the intricate hierarchy of Korean language. In Korean, you must always know your place, he said one evening while the twins played in the next room. Every word, every ending, tells people where you stand in relation to them. It's built into everything we say. That sounds exhausting, Chloe said. Having to calculate your position with every sentence. It's order. Structure. Everyone knows where they belong. He poured soju into small glasses, the clear liquid catching the light. But perhaps sometimes, lonely. One evening, after the twins were asleep in their rooms upstairs, he poured soju and gestured for Chloe to join him on the traditional floor cushions in his study. The room was lined with books, Korean literature, philosophy, business texts in multiple languages. Why did you come here? To Korea. His dark eyes studied her with genuine curiosity. Chloe held the small glass, felt its weight in her hand, the coolness of the ceramic. I wanted adventure. Wanted to be somewhere I wasn't just a statistic, you know? In America, I was always the black girl from the poor neighborhood. People looked at me and saw everything they assumed about my life, my potential, my future. I thought maybe here, being foreign would matter more than being black. She laughed without humor, a sound that carried 2 years of disillusionment. But sometimes, most times, I'm more alone here than I ever was back home. At least there, people saw me. Here, I'm either invisible or I'm everything they think they know about black women from hip-hop videos and stereotypes. I'm fetishized or feared, desired or despised, but rarely just seen as human. I see you, he said, voice low and intense. Their eyes met. Held. The air between them shifted, charged with something neither wanted to name. Your wife, Chloe whispered, needing to understand. What happened? The article said accident, but pain carved lines around his mouth, aging him a decade in a heartbeat. His hand trembled slightly on the table before he controlled it. Car accident. Or that's what they ruled. In my world, there are no accidents. Only attacks and responses. He stared at the soju glass like it held answers. She was good. Kind. Everything I wasn't. She saw the man I could be rather than the monster I'd become. And they took her from me because killing her was easier than killing me. His voice cracked. I became what I needed to be to protect them. To make sure no one could touch my children again. But I can't give them what you do. I can give them safety, money, protection. But warmth? Joy. The feeling that the world is good? That died with her. Chloe's hand moved across the table, covering his. Electricity shot through her arm where their skin touched. You're doing better than you think, she said softly. His fingers turned, intertwining with hers. You make me want to be better. They both leaned in, drawn by gravity neither understood. His phone shattered the moment. The ringtone was harsh, urgent. Business. Always business. Andy pulled back, walls slamming into place, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the crime boss's mask. I should. Yeah. But neither moved immediately, caught between what they felt and what they feared. The space between them felt electric, impossible, dangerous. Finally, Andy stood, answered the phone in clipped Korean, left the room. Chloe sat alone in his study, her hand still warm where he'd touched her, and wondered what she was doing. Wondered if she was falling for a man who lived in a world that would never accept her. Wondered if it was already too late to protect her heart. Outside the window, Seoul glittered with 1,000 lights, beautiful and cold and utterly indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its shadows. Lieutenant Kim slammed the photographs on Andy's desk with enough force to make the expensive wood shudder. The images scattered across the polished surface, Chloe laughing with the twins in the garden, sunlight catching her hair. Chloe leaving the compound, her bag slung over her shoulder. Chloe at the market, selecting vegetables with careful attention to price. Every angle. Every moment. Surveillance that spoke of professional tracking. The Jopik Council is talking. Kim's voice was steel-wrapped in barely controlled anger. The men question your judgment. They're asking questions I can't answer. Andy picked up one photograph, Chloe teaching Jia to braid flowers, both of them smiling. Something in his chest tightened. A black foreign woman with your children? Kim continued, pacing the office like a caged animal. Living in your compound? Teaching them, cooking in your kitchen? They see weakness. They see a man distracted, compromised by a woman who doesn't understand our world. Enough. Andy's voice was quiet, dangerous. No, boss. Not enough. Kim planted his hands on the desk, leaning in. Worse, the Hwang faction is circulating these photos in Gangnam, showing them to other families. They're mocking you, calling you soft, saying you've lost your edge for a foreign woman who couldn't possibly understand what you do, who you are. The photographs blurred slightly as Andy's hands clenched. Increase her security detail. Boss, you need to end this. Kim's voice dropped, becoming almost pleading. Before they make her a target to get to you. You know how this works. They'll hurt her to hurt you, to prove you're vulnerable. And she has no protection, no family here, no one who'll even notice if she disappears. The words sat like lead in Andy's stomach because Kim was right. He'd seen it happen before, loved ones used as leverage, as punishment, as warnings. The criminal world didn't believe in innocent bystanders. Everyone was a potential tool, a potential weapon. You're leaving, Andy told Chloe that evening, voice flat and emotionless. The mask was firmly in place. I'll arrange your flight. Back to America. Tomorrow. Chloe looked up from helping Jiwoo with his homework, confusion crossing her face. Excuse me. It's not safe. My world, you don't belong in it. He kept his distance, afraid of what might happen if he got too close. I'll compensate you for your time. Generous severance. Fire flashed in her eyes, the same righteous anger he'd seen when she'd returned his rent payment. Don't I get a say? No. He moved closer despite himself, desperate to make her understand. This was a mistake. I should never have brought you into this. Go home, Chloe. Before something happens I can't prevent. These children need stability, not another person abandoning them. Her voice rose, and from the corner of his eye, Andy saw Jiwoo and Jia appear in the doorway, sensing tension. You think I don't know this is dangerous? I'm not stupid. But I chose to be here. Then stop acting like you're invincible. The words came out harsher than he intended, laced with fear he couldn't quite hide. Stop treating me like I'm helpless. She stood, facing him down despite the foot of height difference, despite the power imbalance, despite everything. Stop making decisions for me like I'm a child. I chose this. I chose them. You don't get to decide what risks I take with my own life. I can't lose, his voice cracked, the careful control shattering. The words came out broken, raw. I can't lose someone again. You don't understand what it's like, watching someone you. He stopped, breathing hard, realizing what he'd almost said. The air between them crystallized. Ji-woo and Jia stood frozen in the doorway, their small faces worried. Someone you what? Chloe whispered, her voice soft but demanding. Andy's hand came up, almost touching her face, fingers hovering near her cheek. He could feel the warmth of her skin. Then his hand fell, the moment breaking. Go. Please. Before I can't let you. No. The simple word hit him like a physical blow. Chloe. No. Her chin lifted, defiant and beautiful and terrifying in her courage. I'm staying. And you're going to have to actually trust me to make my own choices. You're going to have to trust that I understand the risks and I'm choosing to stay anyway. His control shattered completely. I'm terrified you'll die because of me. That they'll take you like they took her. That I'll come home one day and find you gone, and it will be my fault because I was selfish enough to let you stay. The vulnerability in his voice shocked them both. Ji-woo made a small sound, and Chloe turned to see both children watching with wide, frightened eyes. She knelt down, opening her arms. They ran to her, and she held them close. Your Appa is scared, she told them gently. But being scared doesn't mean we run away from the people we care about. It means we stay and we're brave together. Over their heads, her eyes met Andy's. Then protect me. But don't push me away. Don't make me another loss they have to grieve. Andy stared at this impossible woman, this foreign teacher who faced down his world with nothing but conviction and courage, and realized he was already lost. He'd been trying to protect her by sending her away. But maybe real protection meant trusting her to stand beside him, even if it terrified him more than any gun or threat ever could. The van came from nowhere on a Tuesday evening. Chloe was leaving the Hagwon, later than usual after covering another teacher's class. The street was quiet, that dangerous kind of soul quiet where the busy areas gave way to industrial zones and empty lots. She'd taken this route 100 times, but tonight something felt wrong. The white van screeched to a stop beside her. Hands grabbed her before she could scream, dragged her into darkness. A bag went over her head, rough fabric scratching her face. Zip ties cut into her wrists, plastic biting into skin. Korean voices shouted around her, words she didn't need to translate. The hatred was universal, transcending language. She felt the van moving, heard traffic sounds, tried to count turns to remember the route. Stay calm. Stay alive. When the bag came off, she was in a warehouse. Concrete floors, metal beams overhead, the smell of rust and old machinery. 3 men surrounded her, one filming on his phone with casual cruelty. The leader was young, maybe 30, with a scar across his neck and eyes dead of empathy. He smiled when he saw her fear. Tell Andy Park his foreign whore says hello. He sneered in accented English, then switched to Korean, words designed to humiliate. She caught enough to understand. Kamdungi, dirty, outsider, American bitch. Words meant to reduce her to nothing but her skin color and gender. He grabbed her face, forcing her to look at the camera. Smile for your boyfriend. The phone rang. They put it on speaker, the sound echoing in the empty warehouse. You have something of mine, Andy's voice, deadly calm. But Chloe could hear the rage underneath, carefully controlled. Come alone to the address we text you, or we send her back in pieces. The leader laughed. Maybe we have some fun first, yes? See what Andy Park likes about foreign girls. Chloe's stomach turned. She met the leader's eyes, refusing to look away, refusing to give him the satisfaction of her terror. The wait felt eternal. Minutes stretched like hours. The men smoked, joked, discussed what they'd do to her in graphic detail meant to frighten. One of them touched her hair, and she jerked away, earning a slap that split her lip. She tasted blood. Stayed silent. Wouldn't give them anything. Then everything happened at once. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Gunshots cracked the air, precise, controlled. The man filming dropped first, phone clattering to the concrete. The others reached for weapons but never made it. Chloe never saw Andy arrive, only the aftermath. He moved like violence incarnate, every motion precise and brutal and terrifyingly efficient. This wasn't the careful father she knew or the businessman in expensive suits. This was the monster the streets whispered about. She saw him break a man's arm, the bone snapping with a sound she'd never forget. Saw the gun pressed to a temple, cold and absolute. Saw the cold efficiency of a predator who'd done this before, who would do it again, who felt nothing but purpose. Then it was over. 3 men down. Silence except for her ragged breathing. He was covered in blood, none of it his, when he cut her free with a knife that appeared from nowhere. His hands shook as he checked her for injuries, fingers gentle despite the violence they'd just committed. "Don't look at me," he whispered, voice breaking. "Please don't look at me like this." But she already had. Already seen what he was capable of. Already understood the full scope of the world she'd entered. Back at the compound, he poured himself whiskey with crimson-stained hands, not bothering to wash them first. The blood was drying, dark against his skin. "I've killed 17 men," he said, voice hollow. "Ordered deaths of 30 more. My money comes from nightclubs where drugs are sold, protection rackets that bleed honest business owners dry, politicians I own through blackmail and bribes." He stared at the amber liquid like it held absolution. "I destroy everything I touch. You should go. Now. Before I destroy you too." Chloe's hands trembled. She'd seen the monster. Couldn't unsee it. The violence played on repeat in her mind, the casual brutality, the way he'd moved through those men like they were nothing. But she'd also seen his hands shake when he cut her free. Heard his voice break when he begged her not to look at him. "Is this what you do?" she asked, her own voice unsteady. "Save people by pushing them away?" "I'm trying to save you." "Or are you trying to save yourself from feeling something?" The words came out sharper than intended. "From risking your heart again?" The accusation hit like bullets. He flinched visibly. Her own flaw crystallized in that moment. She'd spent her whole life staying invisible, accepting scraps, believing she didn't deserve better. Was she staying to save him? Or because for the first time, someone saw her completely, and that feeling was addictive? "I've been invisible my whole life," she said, tears streaming down her face, her split lip throbbing. "In America, I was just another poor black girl. Here, I'm just another foreigner. But with you, covered in blood and broken and terrified, I'm finally seen. You see me. The real me. And that terrifies me more than your world ever could." She moved closer, close enough to smell the blood and gunpowder on him. "I'm scared too. Scared of what you do, scared of what loving you might cost. But I'm more scared of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. You shouldn't love someone like me." His voice was barely audible. "I'm a monster. You're a father trying to protect his children. A man trying to survive in a world that doesn't forgive weakness. Yes, you've done terrible things. But you're also the man who learned to cook for his kids because his wife asked him to. Who watches them sleep because you're afraid of losing them. Who's terrified of caring about me because everyone you love gets hurt." She took his bloody hand in hers, the crimson warm and sticky against her palm. "I see all of you. The monster and the man. And I'm choosing to stay." Andy looked at their joined hands, her brown skin against his, blood connecting them in the most literal way. "I don't know how to keep you safe," he whispered. "Then we figure it out together." He pulled her into his arms, careful of her injuries, and buried his face in her hair. His body shook with something between fear and relief. Outside, Seoul continued its indifferent dance of lights and shadows. Inside, 2 broken people held each other and chose to be brave. The call came at 2 a.m., shattering sleep like glass. They took Jiwoo and Jia from school. Kim's voice was granite, professional despite the crisis. "Hwang faction. They want you to surrender the Gangnam territory or they'll..." His voice caught. "They sent a photo. The children are alive but scared. Andy didn't hear the rest. His world had narrowed to a single point of rage so pure it felt cold. His children. His babies. The only good things left in his life. Within an hour, his men assembled in the compound's lower level, armed, ready for war. The kind of violence that would paint Seoul red and cement his reputation forever. 20 men, enough weapons for a small army, faces grim with deadly purpose. We hit them with everything, Andy said, loading his gun with mechanical precision. Every safe house, every business, every connection they have. We burn it all. No survivors. No mercy. We make an example that no one will ever forget. The old Andy was back. The monster who'd built an empire on fear. Stop. Chloe stood in the doorway, still in her pajamas, eyes blazing with an intensity that matched his own. She'd heard everything. This isn't your concern, he began. Those are our children. Her voice cracked, the possessive pronouns stopping everyone cold. And you're about to show them that violence is the only answer. Is this the world you want them to inherit? Blood for blood forever? An endless cycle of revenge and death. What choice do I have? The gun felt heavy in his hand. They took my children. A different one. She moved closer, navigating between armed men who watched her with surprise and something like respect. You think I'm going to stand here and just accept your protection? No. We face this together, or not at all. Andy stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. You want to negotiate with men who would kill you for sport? Who took children as leverage? I want to be smart. She grabbed his phone, pulled up the intelligence files Kim had gathered, photos, financial records, shipping manifests. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. Look, Huang's been skimming from his own people. Partnering with Chinese syndicates, moving drugs through ports he claimed were clean. Your rivals would love to know that. And the police? They'd love evidence of his trafficking operations. The ones involving minors. Andy's mind raced, tactical thinking overriding rage. Strategy instead of slaughter. Information as weapon. It went against everything he'd built. Every instinct screamed for violence, for the immediate satisfaction of revenge, for blood payment. But Chloe was right. A war would traumatize his children further. Would teach them that might makes right, that problems were solved with guns. If this fails, his voice was rough. Then we fail together. Kim looked between them, understanding dawning. Boss, this could work. Huang's already on thin ice with the council. If we expose his Chinese connections, his own people might turn on him. We don't need war. We need to make him irrelevant. Andy made the calls. To rival faction leaders, offering information. To contacts in the police, providing evidence with enough deniability to keep his own hands clean. To council members who'd been suspicious of Huang's rapid expansion. The pieces fell into place with the precision of a chess game. Within 2 hours, Huang was scrambling, his own organization fracturing as subordinates realized he'd been lying to them. The exchange happened in a Gangnam parking garage at dawn. Andy arrived with Chloe and 3 men, a show of confidence, not force. Huang had 20 soldiers, but their body language was uncertain, questioning. You brought your pet? Huang laughed, but it sounded forced. Pathetic. The great Andy Park, brought low by a black bitch. Andy's finger twitched on his concealed gun. Old instincts. The desire to paint this garage red. Chloe stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear he could see in her eyes. We have copies of your ledgers. Your Chinese partnerships. The trafficking routes through Busan. Everything the Jopik Council would consider treason. Huang's smile died. His men shifted, hands moving away from weapons, exchanging glances. Release the children, Andy said, voice measured and cold. Walk away. Retire from the business. Or I send this to everyone, council, police, your own men who don't know you've been selling them out. You'll look weak. I'll look smart. Andy's voice carried absolute certainty. And you'll look like a traitor who endangered children for profit. The standoff stretched. Huang's men were already backing away, loyalty evaporating in the face of betrayal. Huang stood alone, outmaneuvered and outplayed. A car door opened. Jiwoo and Jia ran out, terrified but unharmed. They threw themselves into Andy's arms, and he caught them with desperate relief, gun disappearing as he held his children close. Huang nodded once, defeated. This isn't over. Yes, Chloe said quietly. It is. They watched Huang leave, his empire already crumbling. Andy looked at Chloe, this woman who'd changed everything, who'd shown him a different path. You changed me, he said simply. Everyone saw it. Good, she replied, smiling through tears. Change was the point. 6 months later, Seoul looked different through Andy's eyes. Or maybe he looked at it differently. Saw possibilities instead of territories, saw people instead of assets, saw a future that didn't require constant violence to maintain. His empire had shifted, legitimate real estate ventures with actual business plans, import-export businesses with legal paperwork and tax compliance, investments that didn't require threats to maintain. Some of his old crew grumbled, missing the old days of easy money and uncomplicated violence. Most adapted, appreciating salaries that didn't come with prison sentences or early graves. They'd seen what happened when you underestimated the black woman who'd changed their boss. Respected her for facing down Huang when armed men wouldn't. Chloe walked through the compound like she belonged there now because she did. The security guards greeted her by name. The household staff asked about her day. The men who once questioned her presence now nodded with genuine respect. She'd earned it in a parking garage, facing down guns with nothing but courage and strategy. She still taught English, but now at a school Andy funded, one that welcomed foreign teachers and paid them fairly, provided housing and visa support, treated them like valued professionals instead of replaceable commodities. She'd helped design the program, ensuring it protected teachers from the exploitation she'd experienced. She'd started a support group for other black women in Seoul, creating the community she'd once desperately needed. Monthly meetings in a cafe in Itaewon, sharing experiences and resources, building networks of support and friendship. She wasn't invisible anymore. None of them were. And she let Andy love her. Finally believed she deserved it. The twins thrived in ways that made Andy's chest ache with gratitude. Jiwoo's laughter came easily now, bright and unrestrained, the careful silence of trauma fading. Jia's drawings filled with color instead of shadows, bright flowers and smiling faces instead of the dark, heavy strokes she'd favored before. They had a mother who taught them kindness and a father learning to show strength through protection rather than domination. They had stability, love, the feeling that the world could be safe. February returned with its bitter cold, the anniversary of the night everything changed. Chloe was walking through Gangnam after visiting the support group, past the same luxury stores that had once made her feel invisible. But now people saw her, some recognized her as Andy Park's woman, others knew her from her school, a few from the community work she'd started. She belonged to the city now. Finally, Andy appeared beside her, his car pulling up to the curb. In his hands, a coat. Navy blue, perfectly sized, the exact shade of the one she'd given away. I believe this is yours, he said in careful English that had gotten remarkably better through months of practice. She smiled, remembering another coat, another winter, 2 freezing children who'd changed everything. You know I can buy my own now. I know. But let me give you this. Please. His eyes held warmth she'd never seen that first night, when he'd stood in her doorway like judgment itself. She took it, let him help her into it, felt his warmth wrap around her through the expensive fabric. In my culture, she said, taking his hand as they walked, we have a saying, love sees no color. He pulled her close, speaking in English that carried only a slight accent now. In my world, strength protects what matters most. And you matter most. They walked through Seoul's glittering streets together, a found family forged in fire, 2 worlds that chose each other despite everything. Jiwoo and Jia waited at home, probably doing homework under the watchful eye of their tutor, probably planning to ambush them with hugs the moment they arrived. Home wasn't a place. It was this, his hand in hers, the twins waiting with bright smiles, warmth shared freely, love given without conditions. It was finally, impossibly, beautifully theirs. The coat she wore kept her warm against February's bite. But the warmth that mattered most came from the man beside her, from the children waiting, from the life they'd built together. 1 year ago, she'd been invisible, alone, slowly freezing in a city that didn't see her. Now she was seen. Loved. Home. And it had all started with a simple choice, to give her coat to children who needed it more. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness change everything. Sometimes giving everything when you have nothing is exactly what the world needs. Sometimes love sees no color, crosses every border, survives every threat. And sometimes, the most dangerous man in soul learns that the greatest strength isn't in violence. It's in choosing love again and again, despite the cost.